Hello, everyone, and good day on this recording or this webinar about the Veeam automation spotlight for Cenvora, a Veeam Python, our Veeam Python SDKs. I'm here together with Jonah May. My name is Marius Kevenaar. I'm a VUG leader, the Veeam Vanguard, Object First Ace, Automation Desk, VUG leader, VUG Netherlands leader. What else? Uh, Jonah, how about you?
Pretty much the same resume, but VUG Texas leader instead of VUG Netherlands leader.
Awesome.
And good day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever you want to call it, everyone, because I know we're kind of scattered across some time zones for some of
Yeah,
us.
just for the easiest, just keep it at good day. That always works, right?
Not unless it's night. Maybe they're in Australia or New
Yeah,
Zealand right now.
fair, fair. Do
All
you want?
right,
Yeah,
let's get into it, I guess. So we've got a brief agenda that we'll start off with. So first, what is Cenvora? Why does it exist? We'll quickly go to an introduction to some Veeam Python SDKs we've been working on, and then we've got some example snippets of how to use, or really some example code bases of how to use those SDKs through some Home Assistant integrations. We'll give some time for a quick Q&A, and then we'll tease a couple of upcoming events. So, Maurice, you created the name, you created the GitHub and organization. What is Cenvora? That I
yeah.
apparently
Well,
can't spell because it's the second time that I've typoed it.
um, Cenvora is basically a place to store open source framework integrations or for several kinds of applications. Currently focused on Veeam, but also some Veeam related ecosystems as well. I'm looking at currently we have a Wasabi Wacom plugin as well, aside from some of the Veeam that we have. And I wanted to have a centralized location aside from the Veeam hub and aside from the automation desk GitHub organization, to give it a central place for libraries. It's not so much as code or anything. It's just a set of libraries for Veeam and Veeam related ecosystems. Currently Python only. However, we're looking into different platforms down the line if they are interesting to add as well.
So, why does it exist? This is
Yeah.
partly because Maurice and I both work for different Veeam cloud and service providers. Our companies both have customer portals. They're actually both written in Python. And he and I have had a lot of fun time and increasingly getting into development at our service providers and helping oversee those portals where, things change. A new Veeam release comes out, the API version needs to be incremented, and there was a lot of rewrite effort involved at both of our companies in testing, supporting, and updating the code base to support new API calls, new API versions, any changes from between versions. And so the theory is these SDKs offer a reusable, easy to ingest Python package for now that you have a thin little smart client. It handles some of the basic authentication for you. It's an easy function that you can call to set your versioning. And then from there, it's much easier and faster to maintain your code base and handle things like new API versions, when VBR version 14 drops in the future or something along those lines. Because instead of going in and updating your code everywhere to use the new version, to handle any changes that occurred, you can quickly scan through the SDK, see what changed, maybe do some code branches to support the two different versions, and then just have that single control point that flips you from version 13 to
A
version
to B.
14 when the time
Yeah.
comes. Plus, because it's open source, it can be community maintained. It's not just one person maintaining this low level operational test. The workload can be shared to test it, support new API versions as they release, and so on. So, speaking of which, the Veeam Python SDKs. Why Python? Maurice, you want to take this one?
Yeah, well, Python is a often used API library all over the world. It's fairly easy to learn. It's cross-platform. It's used in a lot of different environments, and we see uh, mostly platforms or portals being created in Python. So yeah,
Fun
that's the
fact, the
reason
most contributed open source project, at least on GitHub,
it's
if not
Python as well.
potentially on the public internet outside of Linux, is Home Assistant, which is Python.
Yeah, and basically every Linux operating system has Python installed out of the box, so you don't need to have any special environments or special creations on Linux or macOS, by the way. It's there by default.
Plus, just about, if you're on the AI or machine learning side of things, just about anything that's open source, community supported that does AI or machine learning is Python. PyTorch being one of the really big kind of main ones for running LLMs for, well, I guess there's Llama C++, but PyTorch for loading in models, creating your own models, training models, doing all kinds of vision and different tasks. And, they've been the leader even before OpenAI was a thing in that, and it was all on Python. So we easy as 3, 2, 1. You see what we did there instead of saying 1, 2, 3? How do you use the SDK? You add it to a requirements file, or you add it to a virtual environment with your pip install command. You wire it into your code, and essentially it translates the Python objects and arguments to an async command to perform the rest, get, post, patch, delete, whatever rest command you send. But like I said earlier, we added a small little authentication client to it. So you don't have to worry about things like, oh, do I need to do a refresh token? Is my auth token expiring? It will automatically know, hey, your auth token is expiring. Let me refresh that and then send the request. But then it sends the action to Veeam, and rather than getting a JSON as a return that you typically then have to receive as the payload, parse it, maybe convert it into a custom object in order to manipulate it, because this is in an SDK, the objects are created from the Swagger docs, and it's just auto created into that object. You can then easily manipulate in your code base.
And small fun fact, we were talking about the Veeam backup and replication one here. The VMBR package at this point has been downloaded last month for 260 times. And just today, only 4 times. So it's being used already as we speak.
I know for a fact I'm using it because I've got it in Home Assistant, and then I'm using 365 in Home Assistant, and I'm using 365 in Service Provider Console at my company, of course, which means every one of our customers who logs into our portal is using it, whether they realize it or not. So, API example. This is extremely oversimplified because really this would be more lines of code on both of these, but more lines of code don't exactly fit in a PowerPoint slide very easily. But without the SDK, you theoretically have to create your session. You have to build authorization headers. Like I said, you call your API. In this example, you can see it's just assuming you get a success. But what happens if you get a non-success status code? How do you handle that in the case without the SDK? How do you parse the object back to something usable when it's returned, other than just a JSON? Versus with the SDK, you can see there's a Veeam client. You give it a couple of arguments like what API version, what's my username, password, or API token, depending on the platform. You open the connection, you will wait whatever calls you want, and you immediately pipe it back to an object. Like you can see there's a repos object. And then you can either reuse that connection across other functions, or you can close the connection and reopen it later. But as I said earlier, it handles the SDK gives you easy session and client reuse. It handles all the token refresh for your authentication for the things like backup and replication that don't let you do like a API key, for example, like Service Provider Console. And it does all that JSON to object work for you. And, well, we
Yeah,
forgot to say this, but I should throw this out there too. For those of you who get the assistance of something like Claude or ChatGPT to write code, I have found personally in some cases that it is much easier to write a piece of code that does an integration with Veeam when you have this SDK as opposed to something raw, because those LLMs can be really finicky about ingesting a Swagger JSON or looking at the API docs and creating a proper request and response method that has all the required arguments and whatnot. When you have something like this installed in a virtual environment on your dev box, it can just really quickly just query a couple Python files and see how it needs to build the function.
So
So
our soon-to-be fully featured suite exists currently already about for Veeam Backup Application, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, Veeam Service Provider Console, Veeam Backup for Azure, and as a bonus one, Wasabi Wacom that I already mentioned before.
for those of
We
you who
are
are with hobby resellers,
yeah, um, and soon we will be having Enterprise Manager Veeam One, the Google Cloud Platform, AWS, Recovery Orchestrator, and one for Object First specifically. Um, we will be adding more and more down the line if there is a demand or even an API available that we think would be interesting to have a Python library. If you are looking for one, reach out to us either on the GitHub or via the community hub, and we'll see what we can do to get that as onboarded as well.
that being said, there does have to be a public REST API. So certain things
Mhm.
looking at you being backup for Salesforce or VDC, there is no public API, at least today. I don't know what the future plans are from Veeam. So as products like that potentially receive APIs in the future, they'll be added to the suite as well.
Exactly.
All
And
right.
we
So
said, we are looking into adding other library for other SDKs and other programming languages if they seem to be interesting.
Python was the easy one. Our
Yeah,
companies are using it, and like I said, Home Assistant uses it, which made a some good example use cases that you can see here in a minute. We'll get into that, but equally so, there's actually a Python package for those of you who didn't know called Open API Python Client, I think, which can actually take a Swagger file and convert it into a client. So we essentially run that on the Swagger docs from Veeam, and then we built the small little thin client on top of it for some quality of life.
and made some tweaks and tunes if required.
Exactly. But it meant it was somewhat easy to build the SDK from scratch, whereas we'd have to look. It might not be as easy for another language.
Mm,
So, why Home Assistant? Number one, it's popular with home labbers and IT pros, as well as being open source. Like I said earlier, it is the most contributed open source project on GitHub. I think it might even be number two in the world behind the Linux kernel itself, which essentially means it's a great way to build an example of how you can use these SDKs while giving people who have home labs like me, who are too lazy to set up something proper like Zabbix or ELK, some proper monitoring for their Veeam infrastructure in their home lab. So what can it do? I'll just go through this quickly because we're going to flip into a demo after this. You can build live backup dashboards from it into Home Assistant. You can set up notifications and automations. You can tie it into your voice assistant, whether that be, Google or Amazon through Home Assistant Cloud or even the local assist pipeline. And it essentially means you can do repository and job monitoring, plus a couple other things like theoretically you could have it tell you when your Veeam license is about to expire so you can go request a new NFR key. So like I said, demo time. Let's get over into
you need
this.
to zoom a bit,
And
I think, because it's
yeah,
for
hang
me it's
on.
already really small.
Where to pin it.
There we go. That looks better.
So you can see I've got my Veeam backup and replication custom integration. It's installed through the Home Assistant community store. And in here, I have a number of backup jobs, backup repositories, scale out repositories. plus a license and the Veeam server itself. So I can click in and see a couple of things like my build version, my database health, what version of Postgres is installed in this case has the VSA. I can see my expiration date for my license, plus some other metrics. And then I can also come into some backup jobs and repositories. So for example, where's a good repository? For example, I can, not necessarily applicable in this case because it's S3 storage, but you can see I can get some capacity warnings in here, used space metrics. I can see how long my data is immutable. I can trigger a rescan. And then coming over to backup jobs, let me think about this. I'm using a lot of Proxmox. Proxmox is not fully supported by the VBR APIs yet, so some of these fields aren't populating fully correctly. You'll see in a minute. But I can get last run, next run metrics. I can even control my jobs from here. And essentially, as Veeam builds a more fully featured VBR REST API, what we'll be able to present into Home Assistant or other products will continue to grow.
I think the 13.1 that's upcoming will have some extra features as well.
It will. Back over in Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, you can see some metrics on my Veeam server and my license, and then my repositories and my backup jobs, same as before, with a lot of similar features. Which nothing flashy, but it does let us go into something like, here we are, something like my dashboard. And for example, here's my backup dashboard. I can see the status of my native Home Assistant backups. I can see the overall health and status of all my Veeam backup jobs, like, oh, look, my agent job for this computer is failing. I can see the health of the repository, same for all the VB365. And that also means that I can go in and do stuff like automations, like, hey, when a Veeam backup fails, send a push notification and create a notification inside of Home Assistant.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if I'm correct, don't get, we're going to add another Home Assistant one soon as well, right?
Yeah, I think we're looking at Enterprise Manager and Veeam 1, depending on what's available in those.
Yeah, exactly. So expect more in Home Assistant soon as well.
Right. But it doesn't just have to be Home Assistant. Again, all of this is up
Just an
on,
example.
let me get the website pulled up. That would actually be helpful. All of this is up on an open source GitHub organization.
I need to
So,
zoom again.
yes. If I go to github.com/Cenvora, you can see we've got our supported libraries. Some are GA, some are in beta. Same with community integrations. So if you want to learn more about, say, the VBR SDK, you can click into the repository. There's a whole README, including how to support new API versions, how to install it, some basic usage. Which also means if a new Veeam version drops tomorrow and you're more ahead of the ball than we are, you could theoretically generate the updated files for these clients and submit a pull request. And then if you're wanting some proper examples of how these SDKs can be consumed outside of the README, that's where you can click into the Home Assistant integrations and you can see how those were built and how they consume these APIs. Like, for example, let me think about this. Button maybe might be a good one.
Like
There's
your
some
sensors?
setup. Yeah.
Like
What
your
now?
sensors? The
I
sensor
could do the
one?
sensors.
'Cause I think those are getting the data, right?
Yeah. Buttons are the start job, stop job, and like rescan repository. But for example,
Exactly.
here's the sensors. So you have some basic Home Assistant boilerplate in here. So you can see every different sensor it's its own entity essentially. And then if I remember right, it might not be this, there might be an entry, but somewhere in here, coordinator.data.get license information. It is not in here. let me think about this. Where did we put it? I'm not a Home Assistant dev by trade, so. Okay, here it is though, actually. Yeah. So here's our async setup entry. Here's the whole how do you use the smart client, get the API version, get the credentials, the host, the port, all that fun stuff. Whether or not to have SSL enabled. Here's my client connection. And then here's several API endpoints that we queried to get the licenses, the jobs, everything you just saw in Home Assistant, which are then called in various update polls in different areas throughout this code.
So it's easy to use, and with this example, if you are looking into how to actually get starting with this API, you can just see how we already implemented it for Home Assistant, and yeah, you can get yourself started. Are there any questions so far? If you do, feel free to unmute yourself and speak or send a message in chat. I'm seeing a no thanks. I'm pretty sure Michael is interested in this as well. I'm not hearing him. I'm putting you on the spot here. I'm doing a rig right here. Great stuff. We need to make sure we can share this wide. Yes,
Yeah.
please make it far and wide. Okay. If there are no questions other than that, it leads us to a reminder about the fourth annual Veeam Community Hackathon on October 12th, starting 9 a.m. Eastern Time or 3 p.m. Central European Time until October 16th, 9 a.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Central European Time. If you are interested, please sign up right now. The signups are still open until October 1st. I'm looking at you as well, Michael. I'm expecting you to do something with these Python libraries.
Yeah. This means it should be much easier to get the hackathon project started if you're coding in
Exactly.
Python, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
So please sign up. We created a really nice portal. Yes, sorry, Michael, putting you on the spot again. We created a new portal, which runs on Python as well, by the way.
New portal, new
So
registration system. If you
exactly.
participate year over year, you'll find it a much smoother experience to use because it remembers your information year over year instead of you having to fill out a long form every time.
And then we'll go to the next slide, which is our upcoming events. On August 25th, we'll be doing a Automation Desk 101, an overview of AI coding tools. And September, we'll be doing another spotlight. We're looking into a project right now. No confirmations just yet. And in October, we will be having the Veeam Community Hackathon. So we'll not be doing a webinar at that time.
Well, we will. It'll just be more the live stream for the hackathon
Yeah,
itself, like the opening ceremony and the halftime show.
exactly, but not like this. Not like this. Not a 101 or a spotlight. So if there's no other questions, can you put up the slide for signing up again, so people can scan that QR code and join the hackathon? And then I would like to thank everyone for joining.